So I did my research project over the fast fashion industry. First, my question is centered around what is the global ethical and environmental cost of fast fashion? And my claim states that fast fashion is ethically and environmentally at a great cost. Therefore, it should not be globally accepted and supported. The impact that fast fashion has on our environment alone is extremely detrimental. It's contributing towards global warming, um, waste accumulation. The microfibers and the plastics that are found in the clothing are really horrible for our environment, etc. And so, a little background on fast fashion. Fast fashion is defined as readily available, quickly and inexpensively made clothing. So, with fast fashion, there's constantly new clothing being made and constantly new trends popping up. It's often shipped from overseas factories and it's all created very cheaply with materials such as nylon or other microfiber plastics. And another focus point that I researched was the hazardous working conditions in which um, fast factory fast fashion factory workers are working in. And so my first evidence came from a case study that was compiled with multiple different fast fashion companies to observe the factories and their working conditions specifically. A quote that I pulled that I felt was really important states, "Due to poor political infrastructure and organizational management, occupational and safety standards are not enforced in fast fashion factories." So basically, this study um, compiled lots of observations and evidence, which all pointed towards really unsafe working conditions. A lot of things that were commonly found were respiratory issues due to the poor ventilation in these factories. They're all kind of created around like a sweatshop type environment, as you can kind of see in this photo. It's all extremely chaotic, unorganized, and just a not safe environment for anybody to work in. So my second piece of evidence came from a study that stated that 1.2 billion tons of carbon is released into the atmosphere just from fast fashion alone. And it also found that fast fashion brands are now producing almost twice the amount of clothing today as opposed to 20 to 25 years ago. So we've nearly doubled the amount of clothes that we are producing. So this is heavily contributing to global warming and the increase in chemical pollution, and also just the increase in waste in general with constant new clothes and trends being created. People are constantly purchasing new clothes, therefore getting rid of old clothes or which are clothes they might not have even worn very much, um, just with all the constant new trends and new clothing popping up. This study also showed that 92 million tons of waste occur from fast fashion alone per year, and 79 trillion liters of water are consumed in just the creation of fast fashion. So not only is a lot of um, um, waste happening from clothing, there's also obviously a very large amount of water that is used just to create fast fashion. So, my third piece of evidence states that the environmental injustice just long after, or continues long after a garment of clothing is sold, because of how quickly, like I was just talking about, because of how quickly clothes are constantly being produced and new trends are being started. The old ones are just being thrown out and therefore contributing to a lot of the waste. And actually, in this graph, you can see the clothing sales, which just continues at a very steady increase over these 15 years. And while that is steadily increasing, the average number of times an item is worn is steadily decreasing. So we're starting to buy more and more and more clothes while wearing them less and less, like the same amount of times. So this again, contributes to a lot of the clothing waste. So some reasoning that I wanted to talk about. This graph gives a really good, proves some really good points. It talks about how the U.S. generates approximately 25 billion pounds of textiles per year. So textiles being any sort of clothing, footwear, towels, bedding, curtains, drapes, stuff like that. So there's 25 billion pounds being created every single year just in the US. So that averages out to be about 82 pounds per United States resident. And only about 15% of that is getting donated or recycled, and 85% of it goes to our landfills. So this just goes to show how much clothing you waste, just even alone as an individual. That's really a lot, and how little is being donated or recycled. So it's really, really important to remember to always donate your clothes if you can, or even recycling or upcycling is a really, really cool way to reinvent your clothing if you can. So the study that I talked about wanting to do would be an observational study, and just focusing around the question of the ethical and like moral treatment going on in fast fashion factories and in that industry. So I think it would be ideal to conduct this in maybe 3 different fast fashion factories around 3 different locations, where like approximately 10 observers could go and spend 5 days, so 1 week, at the factory observing the working conditions, um, following along some specific guided questions to stay focused kind of on the same track, and focus on the work environment, and then also be able to provide a survey for the workers in the factory, and allow them to give their thoughts and inputs on their working conditions, their day-to-day work, etc. And observations can be then evaluated and discussed thoroughly and compiled into compared to other similar observational studies, to just kind of analyze all of that data thoroughly and kind of get more of the behind the scenes of the fast fashion industry. And these are my references.